bring my man on. We are joined, the man himself, KJ No. KJ No, he is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He was contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It is now available at iacenter.org. You can also check out KJ on the Breakthrough News Network on the China Report. KJ, my man, how are you doing this morning? How you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay. Thank you. Good to be with
Good.
you.
It's good to be with you too. There is a fascinating story that is coming out right here. So this is a quote by Xi Jinping, and some of these quotes are fascinating, just in their implications. So President of China, Xi Jinping, meeting Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of Russia, made some remarks about the United States and Europe today. Xi Jinping said, quote, China and Russia are not building an alliance. We're building a new global reality. The West must either adapt or disappear. He continued, the West wants others to live in perpetual poverty so that its banks can remain rich. Well, that's true. He then made the point of saying, we do not seek to rule the world, only to liberate it from those who believe they own it. That's a wow statement, KJ. Before we step into that, give me your take on it. First, is that quote accurate? Second, wow, if it is.
Yeah, so I think that certainly it is a powerful statement. I mean, when he says that they're creating a new global reality, I think that's very much true. That is what they are doing. Do they want the world to be? Do they want to resist the fact that the West wants to keep the world in perpetual poverty? Yes, absolutely. This is the state of affairs, and he's saying that they want to liberate the world. So that is very true. I actually have not seen the readouts from the Chinese that have said that. So
Fair.
yeah.
Okay.
But
this is floating around in social media, and this was a report that I saw in an article. So let's put a caveat around it until we see the readout.
Well, I would say that President Xi Jinping believes these things. I think that it's fair to assume that this is what drives him, but we don't have explicit statements. So I think it needs to be given a little bit more time to see if that is actually what he said. Traditionally, that's not the language that he usually uses.
Exactly.
And it's certainly not the usual language of the Chinese foreign ministry. So I think on the one hand, yes, I think that this is what drives President Xi Jinping. And on the other hand, let's wait for the direct affirmation, the direct readouts from the foreign ministry.
That's fair. Because when I kept trying to validate it. And when you see stuff on social media, it's just on social media. And I was looking for the actual readout of the quote where he was saying it. So like I said, let's put caveats around it until we can verify that is indeed the actual quote. If it is.
Yeah. I mean, what he said at the SCO was that, and this is from the horse's mouth, this is a readout. President Xi Jinping stressed that in the face of a turbulent and changing international landscape, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, must stay focused, remain confident, act efficiently, and play a more proactive role in injecting greater stability and positive energy in the world. It should remain true to its founding mission and serve as the torchbearer of the Shanghai spirit, should take mutual trust and mutual benefit as the foundation of cooperation, equality, and consultation, and to respect diversity of civilizations as a means to promote harmony and inclusiveness, and the pursuit of common development as the path to achieve win-win results and prosperity. So this is the general tone that I'm seeing out of the SCO meeting. I don't see, and that's kind of in alignment with the general language that he uses. He also says the SCO should improve mechanisms to address security threats and challenges, strengthen
Interesting.
security barriers, and meet the people's aspirations for a peaceful and secure life, etc. That's not trivial. I mean, that amounts to similar to what is being said. The other statements almost sound like a kind of a summary
Yeah.
of this statement. He also says the SCO should firmly oppose hegemony, power politics, and bullying, and promote a more and equal and orderly multipolar world, uphold and unite and lead the global south, and build a more just and equitable global governance system, and pool great strength to build a community with a shared future for mankind. He's essentially saying that this is the new global reality. So,
Yeah.
and that we're working to liberate the world. But once again,
That
those
language. Yeah.
language is not
Yeah.
what I'm seeing.
Wow. What does a new security reality mean in this context?
The new security reality means that small countries do not get bullied, that they work together to resist hegemony. They resist the US's, treating them as weaker nations, whether, the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must. So that could involve, most certainly, it involves at the most basic level, logistical, trade, economic alliances, but also technical partnerships, and to a certain extent, where it's necessary, some kind of military technical cooperation. I think these things are all being built out. I think the lesson of Iran is very present on their minds. I think they're very, very aware of what's going on in Palestine. China is also a member of the Hague Group, the 30 nations that are getting together to decide that they're going to take much more concrete action against the Israeli genocide. And I think also this kind of constant encroaching and escalation against China is also very present and visible. Remember, Australia and Japan
So,
have just been told by Elbridge Colby, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. He has said essentially, you need to pick sides. Are you with us or against us, against China? So I think that is really an important development. He's literally said to them, "Are you going to join us in war against China?" And both Japan and Australia have been non-committal. And this is very stunning, because on the one hand, you have Elbridge Colby saying, "Are you going to go to war over Taiwan Island?" which is a country that we are kind of on the fence whether we are going to commit or not, right? Because the US technically still has a one China policy. And
right.
on the other hand, it's, China has absolutely no reason to attack Taiwan. It wants peaceful reunification. It's just a family affair. So, as far as they're concerned, or as far as both Australia and Japan are concerned, this is a pure hypothetical for something that the US is not committed to, at least on paper, and yet they're asking for a direct black and white commitment from Japan and Australia. This signals how desperate the United States is, how desperate it is to go to war, that it wants these countries to, quote unquote, pre-invest, even before the US itself is willing to make some kind of black and white statement. So it's a mess. It's all over the place, but it signals desperation.
Why do you think they put that out there now? Because it's weird. It's not like the United States is gearing up or is, let's say, in a position to attack China. It's not like China is making any moves on Taiwan. And it even sounds weird to say make a move, considering it's the same country. Well, why do you think that this is the moment that the US is trying to get this kind of black and white commitment from these countries? And I thought it was South Korea, but maybe I got that wrong. You're probably right. It was Japan and thing. I think it's interesting that it wasn't South Korea, to be honest.
Yes,
Um,
I think it's perfectly understandable that you would have thought it was South Korea. And there's some speculation as to whether South Korea was also part of this press ganging. On the one hand, it could be that the US already has control over South Korea's military. It has,
Do they?
quote unquote, wartime operational control over South Korea's military. And currently in the House or in the Senate, in the legislature, in the US legislature, there's a move to prevent any return of operational control. Remember, the Koreans have been trying to get back operational control for 3 decades now. And Barack Obama actually promised, we would return it, 2015, et cetera, et cetera. None of it happened. The U.S. does not want to give up control over South Korea's troops.
But
They
TJ,
have,
that's
yes.
just on paper. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's
Mhm.
just paper. That's not real life. Like the U.S. could go to South Korea and say, "Hey, we want you to fight the Chinese," and they could say, "F off." What stops them?
Because the South Korean military, to a very large extent, responds to the U.S. military. Militaries have a chain of command, and soldiers do what they're told to. So, for example, the South Korean military has been known to go directly against the wishes of the South Korean president. Let me give you an example. Moon Jae-in was the president just before Yoon Suk-yeol, and there's the missile defense system, the THAAD missile system, which the vast majority of Koreans were opposed to installing on Korean soil. The U.S. wants the THAAD missile system in Korea because it's strategically tremendously important. It does 2 things. One is it undermines China's nuclear deterrent. And the second thing is if you take the radar and you put it into a surveillance mode, it can scan China to about 2,000 to 3,000, over 3,000 kilometers inland. So essentially turns the
Wow.
entire, it's like a peeping Tom right up against your window. It renders the entire Chinese continent transparent. So the Chinese have been deadly opposed to this. And of course, the Korean government was deadly opposed to this. Absolutely, it was a no-go. We don't want this. And the legislature said that, we're not going to fund this because, of course, as the US does this, that is, $1 billion system. They don't want to fund it. And so what the Korean military did was they decided that they were going to place it inside a golf course. This is the Lotte Sky Hill Golf Course. Okay, why is it on a golf course? Yes, because it's on a high hill, which gives it, it's an unobstructed view. And secondly, they didn't want to have to buy anything. They didn't want to have to buy any land because buying land would involve an appropriation from the South Korean legislature, which the South Korean legislature said that they were opposed to. So they didn't have any way of buying land. So the military simply did kind of a backdoor deal with the South Korean conglomerate with which they were very, very close, Lotte. And then they placed it on this luxury golf course. And here's the kicker, Jamal. The ruling imperial elite, they really love their golf courses, right? They really love their golf. Biden and Trump, when they had the presidential debate, it was all about golf, right? I mean, they really, really love their golf courses. If they decide to turn a golf course into a missile zone, into a missile platform, that they're really, really serious about war because they don't like to give anything up. So anyway, they turned Lotte Sky Hill into the THAAD missile launch platform. And so they got that land essentially for free without any undergoing any government appropriations. And then when Moon Jae-in came in, when he was elected, he said, I oppose the THAAD. We're going to put a freeze on the importation of THAAD missile batteries in South Korea. Everybody stop what you're doing. Don't do it. And you know what happened?
They did it anyway.
They did it anyway. They just brought it in. They ignored the order from the commander-in-chief of the country. And once the THAAD was in place, Moon Jae-in said, why did you do this? This is a directive. This is a direct order from me, your president. And do you know what the Korean military said? They said, we had an agreement. We had an agreement with the U.S. military. And part of that agreement was to not even let you know. Therefore, we had a non-disclosure agreement with the U.S. military. Therefore, we couldn't let you know. Okay, that's what
outrageous.
That's
outrageous.
It is outrageous. If you look at American, security experts, they say this is the most unprecedented. Not that, but the fact that the United States still has operational control over South Korean troops is the most unprecedented surrender of sovereignty of any country in the world. No other country, no other sovereign state has its military controlled by another country. But the U.S. has control over the South Korean military. Now, some of them say, and the U.S. says, this is only wartime operational control. Okay, now that is a silly statement. First, because OPCON only applies in war. OPCON is only applied in war because the term operations really refers to war operations. So it's a pleonasm. You're repeating yourself. It's like saying wartime war control.
Right.
Say operation. What was Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Iraqi Liberation, Operation Rolling Thunder? What are these? These are all wars, right? The war on Iraq was called Operation Iraqi Liberation, OIL for short, right?
Mm-hmm.
Operation means a war operation. So when they say we only have wartime operational control, it's a pleonasm. They're just repeating themselves. They're saying the same thing twice. The thing is that generally, OPCON is usually a very, very temporary thing. It only happens either directly during war or it happens during military exercises, usually in preparation for war. And it's usually a temporary thing. And when the war ends, operational control is returned. Well, South Korea signed over operational control to the United States in 1950, in July of 1950, and they have never gotten it back. They want it back. They've demanded back control of their own military. And the U.S. has always said, no, wait. One more thing. You have to do one more thing. Otherwise, we can't return it to you. And in the meantime, the South Korean machine has been a killing machine for the United States. In the Vietnam War, the Koreans sent 20,000 troops to Vietnam. After 1972, there were more South Korean troops in Vietnam than there were American troops themselves. So South Korea doesn't have control over its own military. During the Afghan War, the South Koreans were right in there, right after the Americans. Almost as soon as the Americans had landed, South Koreans were in there, under the radar, hundreds of South Korean officers, etc. So South Korea doesn't have control over its own military. The only fig leaf that the United States has given is to say, oh, we don't have total operational control. We only have wartime operational control. And really the reason for that, the reason why they say that we only have wartime operational control is that in 1980, 1980, the South Korean troops committed a massacre of South Korean protesters. This was the city of Gwangju, 1980 May. They killed hundreds, possibly thousands of protesters who were opposed to the military dictatorship. And all of those troops who went down there would have been authorized to do so by
The US.
the US because the US has operational control over them. And so, in order to kind of put a fig leaf and to disavow these types of incidents, these types of massacres, the US says, oh, we don't control them during peacetime. We only control them during war. Well, South Korea is at war. It is still technically at war with North Korea. And secondly, as I said before, the job of the military is war. So when you say that you only control it during wartime, that's like saying I only control the car when it's on the street. When it's in the garage, it's your car. But the moment it's on the street, the moment it's being driven, it's my car. Well, then it's not your car, Jamal. If
I
the
mean,
only time you ever get to control it is when it's in the garage, you're the maintenance guy, right? You're changing oil and you know
yeah.
maintaining the tires. But as far
And
as
it's military. The entire point of it is to be used. I
is
mean, meaning,
to
yeah,
fight,
I mean,
to wage
yeah,
war. Mhm.
exactly. Like that's the only time it will be used, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Targeted. Yeah,
so it may be that it may be that the US is already assuming that it doesn't even need to force Korea to pick a side because it controls the South Korean military. Or it may be that they had put pressure on Lee Jae-myung, and according to scuttlebutt, they said that Lee Jae-myung was opposed to it. But if he is opposed to it, he will not be for long as president. And Japan has said that we don't respond to hypotheticals, and Australia also has been non-committal. But
hmm
essentially, Colby has said, we want to know, he said to US allies, what would you do in the event of war over China? He phrases it, or he tries to frame it as quote unquote deterrence. But deterrence against what? China
right.
does not have war designs against Taiwan Island. It wants peaceful reunification with family because Taiwan Island and the people on Taiwan Island are literally family.
I mean, KJ, even if China did, so what? Like, meaning the United States is effectively asking Australians and Japanese to be fed to the Chinese military. And more to the point, like even in a larger sense, China is a nuclear power. And I understand that the US believes that it can have this kind of nuclear war and win it. It's nonsense. Like the premise that we should go to nuclear war for Taiwan is as outrageous as we should go to nuclear war for Ukraine. Both of those premises are absurd. It. When I heard this and that they were asking Japan and Australia this, I was like, there's no way Australia and Japan are stupid enough to do this. It's one thing to say, okay, we want favors from the US. We want deals with the US. We want a financial relationship. We want get weapons. Hell, we may even buy weapons from the US for it. That is different than are you willing to feed Japanese and Australians to the Chinese wood chipper on behalf of the United States in order to fight for Taiwan? Okay, that's insane.
Well,
That's insane.
I mean, let's have a look at this. I agree with you. It's insane. And certainly neither the Japanese people nor the Australian people want themselves to be fed into the wood chipper. None of them want war with China. China is still their greatest trading partner. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants war, Jamal. I mean, we know this. I mean, ask anybody, do you want war with China? Of course, we all say it is insane.
Yeah.
But let's think a little bit about history because history informs the current situation. The Japanese have had a one party state since 1955. This is the LDP.
Mhm.
And there was only a kind of 2-year hiatus from this one party state domination of the LDP since its formation. That was, if I'm not mistaken, Hatoyama, who was a socialist, and they got rid of him right away. He was cooed faster than you could sneeze. But the LDP is a coalition made from Japanese war criminals, unrepentant Japanese war criminals, and unrepentant Japanese industrialists, the corporations that fed the Japanese war machine, and the Japanese Yakuza, Japanese organized crime. This infernal triangle of war criminals, industrialists, and gangsters was brought together by the CIA, literally funded by the CIA. And then they were turned into the one-party state that controls Japan and essentially is a quisling government. I'm very impressed that they have said a few things in opposition to this, but let's stay the course and see what happens, because everything that Japan has done leading up to this moment has been to follow what the United States has been telling them to do. Most notably, Shinzo Abe essentially gutted the country's peace constitution and
Yes.
agreed that anywhere where Japan went to war, the U.S. Anywhere where the U.S. went to war, Japan would also go to war as well. And traditionally, Japan has always served as a kind of a base, forward base for the United States. That's why you have, the vast number of troops. That's why you have, over 100 military bases in Japan and along the first island chain, the Ryukyu Islands, the Okinawan Islands that surround China. And some of them are very, very close, very, very close to Taiwan Island. Yonaguni Island is practically, swimming distance. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but it is the closest, most southern island, and it's the closest to China. And the U.S. has been placing Tomahawk missiles on these islands. Tomahawks are subsonic missiles. They're offensive missiles. Subsonic missiles means that they're slow moving. They're not used for counter battery attacks. They are offensive weapons. So they place Tomahawks on them. Tomahawks are nuclear dual use platforms. So they put tactical nukes on them. And here's the kicker, Jamal. They have been placing these Tomahawks and missiles on golf courses. Once again, the ruling imperial elite loves their golf. If they are ready to sacrifice golf courses, remember the ruling imperial elite never make any sacrifices. But if they're willing to give up golf courses in order to put military platforms on them, you know that they're dead serious. They're deadly serious. And the nuclear piece, let me read for you what Elbridge Colby has said. Now, once again, Elbridge Colby is the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. He came out of the Center for New American Security, which is the neocons think tank. It's the neocon think tank. This is where 18 of Biden's top administration officials came out of, including all the neocons. All the neocons came out of the Center for New American Security, as did Elbridge Colby. And Eli Ratner is currently in Elbridge Colby's institute, which is the Marathon Institute. Same thing. They're all a network of neocon think tanks. But he has said, and I quote, this is the testimony before the Armed Services Committee over 10 years ago. He's saying, we're entering a period of significant and possibly dramatic change in both the geopolitical and military technological spheres. The U.S. is likely to confront more significant challenges to its interests from countries like China. This will have major implications for U.S. defense strategy, but also for a nuclear deterrent. Accordingly, the U.S. needs to adapt its nuclear policy and posture. The United States should adapt its nuclear forces to be able to fight a limited nuclear war more effectively. And then he writes in Foreign Affairs, if you want peace, prepare for nuclear war. In his recommendations at CNAS for U.S. nuclear strategy says, in a situation in which the US has lost the conventional advantage, US nuclear weapons should play a vital role in bringing a war the United States and its allies are losing to a tolerable close. Let me say that again. A war that the US is losing, the US should use nuclear weapons in order to bring it to a tolerable close. In other words, and we know that all the war games show that the US would lose in a war against Taiwan. So essentially, we know that this is a foregone conclusion that nuclear weapons will be used in a Taiwan engagement. And he says, once again, it will therefore be important for the United States to maintain the ability to forward deploy theater nuclear forces, et cetera, et cetera. The ideal US nuclear force is capable of conducting effective, limited nuclear operations while maintaining the ability to escalate to full-scale war if necessary. Effective nuclear war capability provides greater leverage and advantage for the United States. He's been saying this, Jamal, for 10 years. He wrote the US National Defense Strategy, and he is currently the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. So, I mean, this is what they're planning. This is what they're cooking. This is what they are banking on.
But these people are lunatics. Because I don't. It's that is shocking paperwork. Tactical nukes are nukes. And the moment that you get into a tactical nuclear war, you enter a regular nuclear war. It's not like, okay, let's just keep this to tactical nukes. That's not the way countries are going to think. Any country, whether it's China or Russia, is going to have the exact same policy that if they're losing, they will employ nukes in order to level the. I don't doubt what you're reading. It's insane. Like there's a level of sociopathy associated with that is breathtaking. And it is blisteringly insane. That like he is postulating that when we lose a war, because we will lose that war, that we can employ tactical nukes to leverage and balance it out. And China will also stay to tactical nukes. Okay, what gives you that thought process that China would allow themselves to lose a nuclear war with you? Like there's no way to win that. I guess that's the thing I always come to. When I was having a conversation with Jeff Rich. Jeff Rich said hi, by the way. And Jeff was like, he says, yeah, I don't think Australia will be fed to the Chinese on behalf of the United States. Okay, maybe not. But what they are planning, though, will go to nuclear war by definition. It has to. Either the U.S. is going to accept losing a conventional war, or the U.S. is not going to accept losing a conventional war, which would employ, as Colby is talking about, nukes. That's an astonishing document.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
astonishing
going
document.
back to Australia, we both know Jeff. I trust that Jeff has good insights and good knowledge about Australian political affairs. But once again, I like to look at the larger historical context. Like South Korea, Australia has always participated in US wars. They are, after South Korea, they're probably the second or third down the list in terms of being press ganged and roped into US wars. They've always fought on the behalf of the US. They were a huge contingent in the Vietnam War and also during the Afghan War. I mean, this came out more recently. Australian special forces, when they were deployed to Afghan, one of the first things that they would do is they would grab a young Afghan kid, and then they would slice these kids' throats with knives. And this is what they called blooding. This was their kind of initiation ritual. You join, these special forces troops. This is how you show that you're one of the gang. Australians have been incredibly militaristic on the part of empire. They are a settler colonial state. And every time Australia has tried to do the right thing, guess what happens to their government?
collapse.
They get cooed, right? So
Yeah.
1974, Gough Whitlam, probably one of the best politicians of certainly of Australia, certainly of the 20th century. He did all of the things that people associate with Australia that make us think that Australia is a decent country. Before that, it was like South Africa. It was a settler colonial state, just genociding the Aboriginal peoples left, right, and center, shooting
Yeah.
them up for fun. And they are still a deeply, deeply oppressed group of people who have faced genocide. They have been almost, completely genocided, but they still resist and remain and survive in pockets. But Gough Whitlam said that he was going to return some lands to the Aboriginal peoples. He did that. He also, created, healthcare and free university education, the kind of things that you associate with a modern developed state.
Right.
And he also withdrew U.S. troops from Vietnam, and he wanted to get rid of U.S. bases. Okay, he wanted to get rid of the U.S. Listening post in Alice Springs. And when he did that, he was cooed almost immediately. They got rid of his rear end as fast as they could by literally by drawing on the reserve powers of the Queen of England, right? The Queen of England appoints, the Governor General of
Right.
Australia, and the
Right.
Governor General has these out of the pocket, under the table reserve powers that are not subject to any scrutiny. And the Governor General used these powers to kick Gough Whitlam out, and he was no longer present. I mean, technically, they shut off supply, funding for the government, and then that gave them the pretext. But the Governor General essentially fired Gough Whitlam, one of the most popular, one of the most decent, one of the most courageous politicians of the century, fired him overnight and placed in a U.S. stooge. Same thing happened with Kevin Rudd around 2008, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
He was not a pro-China Sinophile, but he refused to go along 100% with Barack Obama's pivot to Asia. The moment he did that, he was toast. They
Yeah.
got rid of him right away, faster than you could, sneeze. And they put in Julia Gillard, who did everything the US wanted. And so the US has a way and a habit of cooing governments and leaders, especially in its tightly controlled vassals who do not go along with the program. So I sincerely hope that Jeff is right and that there is strong and real resistance. And perhaps, these leaders are not only listening to their people, their country, men and women, but also that they're listening and seeing, the way in which the political tide is turning. The U.S. is not a reliable partner. It is dangerous to be a friend of the United States, and it is deadly. It is dangerous to be an enemy of the United States, and it is deadly to be a friend. I hope they remember Kissinger's maxim, because that is what is going to happen to them very soon. They're going to be fed to the chipper soon, and it's going to be a nuclear chipper.
That's terrifying. Because I believe you, actually. I do think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get this, they want to pivot to Asia. And they believe in world primacy and that they're losing their primacy. And that part of the thing, in order to, it's almost as if the world is drifting in a direction. And the US is trying to swim against the tide. And it's getting more provocative in what it's trying to do in order to keep the tide from going in a particular direction. And it's like, it's going that way. Either you end the world or it goes that way. And you may have some people who are willing to say, okay, well, we're rather in the world. We're going to break our toys so you can't play with our toys. That is terrifying. And yet that seems to be where these maniacs are going.
As I've
KJ, I'll
said
leave you with the
before,
last word.
Jamal, as I've said before, the ruling imperial elite would rather see the end of the world than the end of their supremacy, of their power and privilege. I believe that they are capable of waging both tactical and strategic nuclear war. And I hate to say this, I really, really hate it when those words issue from my mouth, because, it's a terrible thing to say. But I believe that we have to be aware of the risks. We have to be aware of what's at stake. And we also have to be aware of how the ruling imperial elite think. Look
Yeah.
at what is happening in Palestine.
Yeah.
Overt genocide before your eyes. Children being shot to death every single day. People, parents, fathers being killed simply for the crime of wanting to feed their families, right? Literally being baited and shot, and genocide live streamed before your eyes. And the Western press, they simply deny it. They say it is not happening. The genocide, these murders, these killings are not happening. That is how depraved they are. And they
Yeah.
believe that if they believe that they can get away with this, you know that they're thinking of much, much worse and much, much more depraved things for a world war. I mean, this is, just in terms of scale, that is a small atrocity. They're capable of mass atrocities. And as I said, you and I have had this discussion back and forth. They would lose too. No. They would be killed too. No. They believe that they're going to survive. They have underground bunkers, or they believe that they're going to be raptured, and hence, the conflict of interest, or they're already dead inside. They're already dead. They're zombies, nihilists. They don't believe in anything. They only believe in power. So that is what is so deeply, disturbingly dangerous and depraved about this current moment. Right now, just very recently, the US Air Force and the Space Force together did the first department level exercises in a generation. They haven't done these types of military exercises since the end of the Soviet Union. They're doing department level exercises. These are war exercises that don't involve divisions or companies or even armies. They involve entire departments. That is to say, the entire Air Force and the entire Space Force. They're rehearsing the kind of interoperability for complete and total war against China. And they name China. This is for preparation for war against China. So the momentum, the acceleration towards total war is extraordinary. And so this is why, we have to sound the alarm. Even if it sounds alarmist, you have to understand whatever we are sounding the alarm about, they're probably, minions in the deep state thinking of much, much worse things than we could even imagine. That's why we resisted.
This sounds. I'm sorry, Kisha. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
Please.
we have to challenge, resist it while we can, while we still have the chance.
I'm of mind that this is the door we have to walk through. Because, look, from my point of view, the world needs. You would think that World War II was the example of, hey, this is not good. But it seems like for the world to get to whatever that next stage is, where it says hegemons are a problem, then you have to go through and play out why hegemons are a problem. And this is why. Meaning countries get into their minds. Like what you're saying is rather astonishing when you really think about it in a larger context. Nobody gave the world to anybody. Like the idea that somebody can take a patch of land and say, I own this land is pretty astonishing in and of itself. To say that I own this world and I'm willing to destroy it if I can't run it is a pretty profound thing to happen. But that is what is happening. The US is making the argument, and the West broadly is making the argument. 14% of the globe should be able to control the rest of the globe. And if it goes in a direction that we don't particularly like, we are willing to end it. That's profound. That's profound. Now the catch becomes, okay, does the world get to the point where it realizes this is not a place for a world to be in? That whatever arrangement, whatever new norm that the world comes up with, kind of like where the world says rape is not great. So we don't want to have societies where rape is okay. Or where they would say pedophilia is not okay because, hashtag reasons. Like meaning the world does come to conclusions, or the world almost is united, says this is off the table, not because almost like because in an ingrained way. It's almost like you learn something in a sense as a planet. And I think we need to learn this thing of hegemons should be off the table. And I don't know what that looks like after the fact. Meaning, I don't know what the world looks like after the fact, where it says this is no more hegemons, because I don't know how you do that. But the world would have to get to a position where it says, we went through this, this was bad, we can't do this. And I don't know how you get to that new norm without going through this. And hopefully, and to back up your point one day that you said, we need to be able to get through it without destroying the world.
I think you're
I don't know.
absolutely right. Yeah. So can we get through this moment? Can we go a few more years and get through this dark night so that we come out the other end without having destroyed the world? Well, I mean, Palestinians are already being destroyed. There's war and violence, intense violence that we don't see happening all around the world. Certainly in Central Asia, in Western Asia, it's happening everywhere. It's just getting uglier and uglier. And as to the lessons to be learned from history, after World War One, people said, never again. We can't let this happen again. How could this happen? This is the end of, Western civilization. Well, I mean, as Oscar Wilde said, the West is the only region that went from barbarity to decadence without going through civilization in between. We're back at the stage of pure barbarity. World War II, right? Again, right after World War One, what did we have? We had a few gestures, and then we had surrealism and Dadaism, right? The world makes no sense. A little bit of existentialism, and then bam, right again, World War II. Right. And then after World War II, once again, never again. This is atrocious. We can never allow such things to happen again. We can never let the Holocaust happen again. It's happening before our eyes. As soon as World War II ended, what did the US do? It went into a genocidal war on the Korean Peninsula. 1 out of 5 Koreans were killed in the north. I mean, if you think Gaza is bad, and it is absolutely unspeakably atrocious. Think of Gaza amplified 900 times. That's what happened in Korea. That went on for 3 years. Okay. And then as soon as, Korea was ended, then you saw Vietnam, which was also a genocidal war. They literally had this thing called a body count, which is to count how many bodies they could kill. That was genocidal intent in scope and in execution. And then you also had Indonesia, where millions were killed. Even in Korea, before Indonesia, and this wasn't even a war, it was just a dirty war. They were killing people off by the millions. In Korea, starting 1948 and leading up to the Korean War, and after the beginning of the Korean War, they had the Border League massacres. Somewhere between 300,000 to 1.2 million Koreans were massacred because they were guilty of the crime of being leftist. This is how the empire works. Empire has been genocidal in intent from inception. It has always been genocidal. We're simply seeing its, the mask has dropped off. We're simply seeing its true nature. And it is, overtly committing genocide, and it is overtly preparing for genocide. It's overtly preparing for ecocide, for planetary ecocide. This is the thinking, the mindset of the ruling imperial elite. And they will cover that up with clever words like security doctrine and realism and, security strategy. But at core, it's, this unbridled desire, will to power, desire for complete and total control. And if they can't have it, they will destroy it. It's, as I said, it's the school shooter mode. It's that, broken relationship. If I can't have you, I'll destroy you.
Yeah.
If you're not subjugated to me, I will kill all of you off, even if I end up dead myself. I think that is the kind of omnicidal, suicidal mode that the empire is in right now. And this is why it's so dangerous. And it's why we have to take a stand. We have to speak out. We have to do whatever little piece of leverage that we have to prevent further escalation and to tamper down ongoing wars and genocide. We have to speak up and take action.
KJ, you're fantastic. Thank you for this. Always appreciate you, man. Always appreciate you. KJ, no, he's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He's a contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It's available at the iacenter.org. You can also find KJ on the Breakthrough News Network. That is a damn good one. Eugene Perrier, I used to work with him at the radio station. And he is, KJ is on the China Report. When is your next report coming out? Usually it comes out a day before you come on here.
Yes, it will be out next Tuesday. And my colleague Amanda does alternating Tuesdays. We alternate Tuesdays. So my show will be out next Tuesday. And in the meantime, if you're interested, I've also done a bunch of recent shows with Danny Haifong, along with Carl Jha and Brian Berletic. And I have also done some interviews for a channel called Empire Watch.
Cool.
And they've done some, published some good stuff around, I guess, the omnicidal nature of the propaganda of empire. So,
Brian Berletic and Carl Jha are fantastic. Brian is going to be on the show on Monday. And Carl is going to be on, I think, tomorrow. Both of them are great guests. So absolutely, I'll definitely check them out. KJ, thank you for this, man. You're fantastic. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jamal.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. We have come to